Male athletes are now competing in women's sports, and they're pushing women off the awards podiums. Welcome to Freedom Alive. Since Title IX passed in 1972, 2 in every 5 girls participate in school sports, but fair competition and equality in women's sports are now under threat. Many interscholastic athletic conferences and even the Olympics currently allow males who claim to be females to compete in women's sports. But no woman should be forced to sit in the stands because a male takes her spot on the floor. Macy Petty is an NCAA volleyball player at Lee University in Tennessee. When Macy was vying for a college scholarship, she was forced to compete against a guy. And she joins us as our guest to share her story. I'm thankful to again be joined by co-host Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel. And Matt, this subject hits close to home with me. As you know, our daughter played college volleyball for 4 years, just like Macy's doing today. And we thought about this issue often. Didn't happen to her, but here we are.
We have at Liberty Counsel one of our staff members who has a daughter who also played college volleyball and now is a women's college volleyball coach. And she could have the same situation. She didn't have this happen to her, but she could have been knocked out. And so many girls are knocked out of competition, especially, in this story that Macy will share. She obviously in high school was vying for college scholarships. So it's very important to be in front of the scouts, to place high. And sometimes if you don't place at a certain level, you can't go to the next level. So you're not going to be in front of the scouts that you need to be. And if you have a male in your competition that knocks you out, you have worked, as you well know, your daughter spent hours and hours and hours in practice and preparation, and they lose that opportunity because some man, some boy, is allowed to compete against girls. It's not only unfair, but it is dangerous because of the difference between the men and the women. And it also interferes with their privacy, and it's frankly unsafe to allow men or boys to go into the women's private changing room, locker rooms, and showers.
Exactly. Very dangerous, very unsafe. So many implications to this story. We can't wait to bring it to you. Our Freedom Alert is next.
A court upholds common sense law that protects children in school bathrooms. A federal judge upheld Idaho's school bathroom law that requires public schools to provide separate bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, and dressing areas for students corresponding to their biological sex. 2 Boise students filed a lawsuit alleging the law discriminated against gender-confused students. The law now takes effect in November while the legal challenge proceeds to trial. The law also gives students the right to sue their school if they encounter a person of the opposite sex while using a facility designated for their biological sex. This is a common sense decision by the district court. The Idaho law is meant to protect children's safety and privacy. At least 9 states have laws requiring public school students to use facilities that align with their biological sex.
Up next, Matt's interview with Macy Petty.
Our special guest is Macy Petty. She is a senior at Lee University where she plays NCAA volleyball on an academic and athletic scholarship. Welcome to Freedom Alive, Macy.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you. So much appreciate you being with us. I love Lee University and all that it stands for. It's a great university, and you now are in your senior year. But in your high school, I want to talk about your experience before you go to Lee University and now competing on the NCAA level, about your background in sports. How did you get involved in sports, and what kind of sports were you interested in? Obviously volleyball, but were there other sports?
Yes, sir. I was very blessed at a young age to go to a church with a sports ministry for young children. It was at the elementary school level, actually. I started playing volleyball and basketball for them. It was a very low-level league. We just kind of go play sports and hear about the gospel, which was a really cool opportunity. But it sparked my interest in sports, and I was homeschooled at the time. And so for my PE time every day, I'd go outside and try and get a little bit better at volleyball. And I just kind of caught this bug for the love of the game. I continued playing basketball through middle school, but eventually decided that volleyball was my sport and that I was going to run after it pretty hard. And I wanted to play in college. And so worked really, really hard throughout my career. But I'm very grateful for that experience back in elementary school, just for introducing me to the sport and finding this new passion.
Well, obviously you have some supportive parents who took the time to invest in your life to homeschool you. And I'm sure that instilled a lot of good Christian values in you as well. So your church, however, though, also had a combination sharing the gospel along with sports. How did that work in your church?
Right. It was a really cool opportunity. So elementary school kids, they would all come to church, maybe once a week. And it was a cool way of being able to tap into this crowd who might not go to church every Sunday. And the parents are just trying to find some kind of outlet for their kids to get some energy out and just play a sport and learn some things from it. But also at the end of every practice, we hear a little gospel message and a little devotion. So everything was kind of centered back to Jesus and the gospel, but we were able to kind of have that sports outlet through it.
Well, that's a great idea and a good encouragement for churches and those that are listening to consider starting something like that in your own church and your community to be able to reach the young people. It's so critically important to reach young people at an early age. And that early age that you're talking about in that elementary level is a very critical time for young people giving their life to the Lord. The statistics show that 85% or so of adults, if you were to survey them, they gave their commitment to the Lord, their life to the Lord, before the conclusion of their 12th birthday. So that's a very critical time in a young person's life. So as you're moving through your life and as a young student, homeschooling, and then you get involved more in sports, you start to migrate over to volleyball. And at the high school level, you started competing in volleyball competitions. How was that experience for you? What kind of effort does somebody of your caliber have to put in to a sport like that?
That's right. So around 8th and 9th grade is when I started competing in club volleyball. So that's where the avenue, if you're trying to play in college, you get on track to play club volleyball, because these college recruiters, they can't go to every high school game to evaluate these student athletes. So they'll go to these massive volleyball club tournaments that are hosted around the country. And so it's a really big sacrifice. You're playing year round and sacrificing nearly every weekend throughout your college or high school career. I was somebody who missed out on a lot of vacations, and I never got to go to prom, things like that you'd have to sacrifice to go to these tournaments. And so there would just be hundreds of courts and all these athletes in one place for these college recruiters to evaluate your skills. And it was a hard lesson to learn early in life, because I am from Rock Hill, South Carolina, but was competing for a club in Charlotte. And so even my practices every day, I'd have to drive up to Charlotte. And so I had to sacrifice a lot of my social life, but it was something that I was willing to do just because I had this goal of playing in college, and that was something I was willing to work for.
That's something I want to talk about, because as a high school or college athlete, you're spending a lot of your time, and it's very important for you to be focused and at the best of your game, especially in the high school level, as you're now looking at colleges and college scholarships. So by the time you get to high school now, you're starting to think about college, and you're starting to think about college scholarships. Now you have some boy that you have to compete against on the volleyball team. How does that affect you as a girl?
That's right. That's right. So at one of those club tournaments, I walked up to the court, and there were several college recruiters there. So as somebody who had been sacrificing and working so hard to hopefully woo one of these scouts and earn a scholarship, this was a great opportunity for me. But then I looked on the other side of the court and saw that there was a boy on the other team, and this was supposed to be a female-only league. This was not a co-ed league, but this boy was masquerading as a female, trying to compete on a girls' team, and volleyball nets are actually over 7 inches higher for men than they are for women. And there were boys' courts on the other side of the convention center. There are plenty of opportunities for boys in club volleyball, but this athlete decided to play on the girls' team despite his biological advantage, and robbed us all of a fair competition because of it. And so we all had to play against this athlete who was taller than us and stronger than us, and was playing on a net over 7 inches shorter than he should have. And instead of being able to show off these skills that we had been working for in front of these recruiters, they instead watched a boy continuously slam the ball in our face.
Well, talking about injuries, the MMA fighter Fallon Fox, I'm sure you're familiar with this person, biological man, gave his female opponent a concussion and broke her eye socket in 2015. Woman said that she had suffered a damaged orbital bone and needed 7 staples after she fought Fox, said that she had never been hit so hard in her life. And, you know, you have Gabrielle Ludwig, 50 years old now, goes to college on the women's team, 6'6" tall, 220 pounds, playing basketball at 50 years of age on the women's team. He holds the ball up, and the women on the team can't even reach it because he's already 6'6" and 220 pounds. It is dangerous. It's unfair because in your situation, you're competing against other girls that are in your same situation where they're dedicating their lives and lots of their time for scholarships and for this sport. And then a guy comes in and steals that prize that you've been working for. Now you're on the college level. You play NCAA volleyball for Lee University. But your experience and your voice as a female athlete, you have used far beyond the playing field. Tell us how you have been involved in those areas to make changes for not only you, but other girls and women in your sports.
Yes, sir. Well, this experience that I had back in high school was several years ago. This wasn't a debate that was happening on the national stage. And so we kind of sat back after. We never really made a big fuss about it because we assumed, okay, this is obviously cheating, right? No one's going to question whether this boy should be on the girls' team. Surely they're going to amend the rules and make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else, right? That's common sense. And what we all assumed would happen, but that wasn't true. And freshman year of college, I received a call from a man who happened to be talking to my mom about a bill that was going through in South Carolina called the Save Women's Sports Act. And he was explaining the bill to me and saying that essentially boys would have to play on boys' teams and girls would have to play on girls' teams. He was asking me to testify because he happened to speak to my mom, and my mom told him about my experience. And I remember being on the phone with him and saying, like, this is ridiculous. Like, we even need to hear this bill? Like, surely this will pass through. No one's going to oppose this, right? And so I testified thinking that this was, common sense. There's no way this isn't going to pass, especially in South Carolina, right? We still have a little bit of common sense left there. But to my surprise, everyone said, this isn't a real issue. You're just picking a fight. This isn't something really, really happening. And then a year later, I got involved with Young Women for America, which is a collegiate and high school project of Concerned Women for America. And they, again, asked me to testify in Tennessee, and I did, and the bill passed. And the very next day, I went to Atlanta, Georgia, to watch the 2022 Women's Swimming and Diving National Championship. And there I watched Leah Thomas, a biological male, steal a national championship away from all of these female athletes. Strictly because of his sex. These women were stripped of fair opportunity because of their sex, and that is discrimination under Title IX. And so we were able to ramp up our efforts and show that this is not some thing that isn't really happening. It's happening now at every age, in every sport. I spoke to elementary school girls who are facing this in their sport, and it's just unreal to me that people are still using this argument that it's not really happening. So we were able to ramp up efforts and continue to amplify the stories of these girls who are losing opportunities and pushed to the side because they are females. So I've been able to to speak with different members of Congress and state legislatures to try and show them that this is happening and that we do need to take efforts to protect opportunity for females.
And you are a young woman ambassador for the CWA organization, and you're a strong voice. So you were actually there in Georgia when Leah Thomas was in that competition.
That's right. Yes, sir. I stood outside and just received so many hugs from parents who were crying alongside their daughters. You know, it's one thing to see them lose, but it's another thing to watch them work, to watch them sacrifice their entire lives cheering them on, and then watch some boy come in and wipe it all away. And then this day that they've been fighting for their entire lives, and they're just denied the opportunity to play in an equal playing field.
Yeah, you know, it's not just for the girl that's playing. You're right. It's for the parents, for the siblings as well. They've lived life with that young daughter to get to that high level competition, and it gets stolen. And in the case of this man in the women's competition, I understand, you know, that the wingspan was so much greater than Riley Gaines and others that he competed against. So it was just really unfair.
That's exactly right. People see these pictures and, you know, the biological differences are undeniable. You see pictures of men standing next to women on the podium, and they're standing nearly a foot taller than everybody else. But there's a lot of things that people don't think about. For swimming, lung capacity, that's not something you can show on a picture, but it's something that makes a real difference. In volleyball, it's like elbow and wrist strength, things that you don't even think about. But the male wrist and elbows and all these little tiny muscle groups are so much greater, and that makes a huge difference when it comes to swinging. So it's not just about height, it's about all these other little things that people don't even think about.
Absolutely. Well, you also went to Washington, D.C., and you spoke at some press conferences there, and the bill was passed. It's called in the U.S. House, Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act of 2023, which aims to protect biological males, prevent biological males from competing in girls and women's sports at schools across the country. Now, the vote on that was 219 to 203. All of the yes votes came from the Republicans, and all of the no votes came from the Democrats. This should not be a political issue. This should be, as you said, common sense.
Right. That's exactly right. And you can see exactly where the political loyalty lies. It is not with women or common sense. You could see through those party lines that the Democratic voters were absolutely intent on this LGBT whatever agenda, and they're willing to sacrifice everything for that agenda, even if it means turning back the clock 50 years for female opportunity in sports. It's something they're willing to do. But I am very grateful for that day. It was a great celebration in Congress to be able to stand firm for basic truths and clarify, Title IX. Girls play girls sports, boys play boys sports. It's not that complicated, but it has been wonderful to see the support. I was able to go to Congress for National Women and Girls in Sports Day and just celebrate female athletes and the accomplishments that they have had and the progress that we've seen for female opportunity over these past 51 years since Title IX.
Yeah, Title IX goes back to the 1970s, and so Title IX is that federal law that actually provides the opportunity for what you're seeing in the sports arena within schools, so that girls can actually have these sports, volleyball, softball, and all these other kinds of sports that are available to them, not only to help them in their competition and their camaraderie and just their development in life, but also scholarships and other kinds of things as well. It makes no sense that we fought for that for decades. And now it turns it on its head, because if a man can go in and pretend to be a woman in a girl's sports and knock out the women, hurt the women, and invade their privacy, we've just turned the clock back 50 plus years.
That's exactly right. And Title IX is a pretty simple piece of legislation. It just says that you cannot discriminate based on sex in educational opportunities. But when you look at what's happening here, women are being denied equal opportunity because of their sex. That's exactly what's happening.
Right.
These are Title IX violations. And so Concerned Women for America was able to file an official complaint with the Department of Education the very day that Leah Thomas stole that national championship. We also went to the NCAA themselves at their national convention, and we told them, we are female athletes and you are discriminating against us. But we've continued to, our pleas have continued to fall on deaf ears. We have not had any kind of response from them. And even last week, Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, was reluctant to talk about any kind of legislation or rule changes that he would make to ensure that this doesn't happen again. He said, look, I'm not claiming what happened then. I wasn't president then, but still under his leadership, he is reluctant to protect female athletes.
So what can people do? I know right now there's a number of states that are passing legislation on the state level to protect women athletes and protect the privacy. It's not only the unfair competition, and it's not only the risk of injury, but it also, as it relates to sports, for example, it's the invasion of privacy. And frankly, it puts women at risk, where you have a man with all of his biological parts come into a locker room where you have to change, undress, shower. And then you don't want, the last person you want to be in that room is a male. And
exactly.
There are some girls that have had the unfortunate situation where they've been sexually assaulted, or they put in a situation where they're afraid of a sexual assault. And then you put a biological male in there, and then that's their right. It just makes no sense.
Right. And Riley Gaines has spoken about how when people who had to change in that locker room with this 6'4" male, completely intact with male genitalia, if they were to speak up about it, they were the ones who said they needed to get help and that they were being transphobic or whatever term they like to use. It's completely ridiculous. So I would say, I show allegiance with these female athletes and these people speaking up, because they have to go against some pretty big giants out there. They are put in unsafe situations because typically protesters are not the most civil.
Yes.
We've seen that time after time, and they're constantly being harassed and put in these dangerous situations. And then they have to go up against people like Charlie Baker and the NCAA, or even the president and his administration. And so just continue to encourage female athletes, female athletics in general, and just show that, there are people who are for them. I'm very confident this is a winning issue and that there is so much support out there, but the opposition is very, very loud. And so we need to be louder. We need to continue preaching truth and common sense.
Well, Macy, thank you for your strong leadership and your willingness to come out and make a difference and speak to this issue. And there are many other young female athletes like you that are just fed up with this. And really, you have no choice. It's kind of like Esther. If you remain silent, the Lord's going to bring up somebody else, but you're not going to be safe. So you've got to continue to speak your voice here. So how would you encourage other girls to go into sports? How would you encourage other girls that are facing some of the things that you have encountered to move forward?
Yeah, I would say just don't let them bully you. I think that, there's a lot of lessons to be learned in college athletics, and being bullied by a bunch of men is not one of them. So I think that being able to stand up is very admirable. And I am a Christian, and I've been able to lean into my faith, and I know that ultimately God is the one I will answer to. And so if He's the one calling to me to this, then He's the one who will equip me for it and continue to give strength. And so I would say to any female athlete who feels the Lord tugging on their heart to get into this fight, to listen to that, because he will prepare you and equip you for whatever He's calling you to, and to trust in His plan for that.
Well, Macy, any final words you want to share with our viewing audience, and points that they can take perhaps at the state level, because there's a lot of states that can pass and are passing state laws?
Absolutely. So first, on the state level, I am very blessed to go to school in Tennessee and was able to testify on the girls' sports bill here in Tennessee. So I am thankful that I will never have to be in a locker room with a man because of it. So these state bills really do matter. So if your state has not passed any kind of girls' sports bill, I would encourage you to call your representatives and ask them to really get the ball rolling on that. There are several people who are willing to help them. Yes,
well,
sir.
Macy, you are indeed not only a Young Women for America ambassador, but you are a great ambassador for our Lord Jesus Christ. So thank you for joining us on Freedom Alive.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Matt, Macy was amazing, great young lady. And as I said at the beginning, this one kind of strikes close to home because our daughter was exactly in that situation, and she just graduated a year ago. She's a head volleyball coach today, very involved in athletics. And I just think what she described about the Charlie Baker, the head of the NCAA, and his kind of no response, and the passion. I can just tell you as a parent or grandparent, and I know there are so many people watching this who can relate to this, watching their daughters play with intensity, with passion, put their whole heart into it. And then you go to college and the pressure, the intense pressure to just ever step on the floor as an athlete, to excel in the classroom at the same time, to do it 11 or 12 months out of the year. It's remarkable.
Because they're having to keep up with their college, particularly in college, their college workload, study load, and then practice and go to games. And some of those games are during college breaks. Where they can't go on college breaks. They're often during college breaks.
And to imagine that this could even be entertained, let alone just so casually accepted. And
well, Macy articulated it so well that this is just common sense. And it's surprising to her that, there would not be 100% a vote that was positive in North Carolina. And unfortunately, they thought it was overblown. In fact, it's not overblown. And now we see that it's more pervasive and it's nonsensical. Because ultimately what we're having here is, when you get to something that just completely defies logic, as this does, it just doesn't make sense to have a boy compete in a girl's sports, just common sense. As Macy says, when you get to that point and there's no objective, rational explanation, I think there's a spiritual component behind it, and that is to attack boys and girls that are made in the very image of God, that with this false ideology that you can change your gender, you can either be the opposite or neither, or you can be a combination of whatever at any time just by thinking it. That is rebellion against the God who created us exactly how we are.
Being obedient to God sometimes takes, things like courage, like wisdom, takes proactiveness and getting involved. Please get involved in issues like this. Please understand your elected officials. Please understand where they stand. We talk about it time and time and time again on Freedom Alive. Elections matter. Elections have consequences. They have unbelievable implications. This is a remarkable issue that is not make-believe. It is impacting many, many, many people in our country today. And we just ask that you would understand it, get involved, and take action. In closing, remember Galatians 5, verse 1, which says, "It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Therefore, keep standing firm and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." Our freedom is a gift from our Creator. We must never forget that and always protect it. So join us here next time, where you'll hear victories as well as ways you can stand up for your priceless freedom. Join us again for Freedom Alive.